It's safe to say just about anyone who was anticipating Marvel's newest Spider-Man game was grateful that Insomniac was able to pull off such a success story. While the last handful of Spider-Man games were borderline bad, the best of them being Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, Insomniac gave us a fresh new take on our friendly neighborhood web-slinger. They managed to redefine free-flow combat, craft strong character relations, and design a traversal system that gave players the true feeling of swinging through New York skyscrapers. With that being said, I don't think any of these aspects come even relatively close to the true hidden success that Insomniac has achieved. What Insomniac has done, what they have brought to the table, is so profoundly important in storytelling, we need to analyze and apply it to just about every superhero game that wishes to put value on their individual characters. Insomniac hasn't really been known for deep, emotional stories. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of Ratchet & Clank, Resistance, or Spyro the Dragon. These are all amazing games in their own right, but the only story that Insomniac has told that was driven by a character's true yearning, the only game that they put a character's emotional journey at the forefront of what the game has to offer, was Song of the Deep. Even then, it wasn't to the extent that the newest Spider-Man game has done. While there is outlandish characters that Peter faces off against, the story finds a way to stay grounded in reality. The driving force behind keeping these heroic characters feeling realistic, at least to the extent that I believe, resides in the fact that these are some of the most human characters we've seen in gaming thus far. What I mean by human is not only the fact that these characters deal with issues that any normal person in Manhattan would have to deal with, but also the nature in which these characters look. These two ideas are something I really want to delve into, because when it comes to the big superhero budget video games, movies, and the likes, essentially anything that isn't a comic book, there's a tendency to put the heroic aspect first. A significant amount of the time when a hero is pushed back into the realm of the normal, when the night ends and our hero has to return to being another part of society, there's a juxtaposition between how they act and react to everyday situations and how a character of their caliber would actually go about living their lives. Especially in cartoons where everything is quite literally animated, not only in terms of looks but in overall acting, there's a large amount of overreacting to smaller situations. In the case of the Arkham franchise, there's rarely a point where Bruce Wayne has to deal with anything as Bruce Wayne. He continually keeps the mindset of Batman regardless of what situation he is in, whether for story purposes or lack thereof. In Marvel Spider-Man, we get a peek into Peter Parker's private life when he finishes battling the Shocker and he must fight the battle against being evicted. We spend an entire story mission looking for his lost flash drive, seeing the anxiety firsthand as he potentially loses years of work and research. We slow down the story at times, whether players would prefer to or not, to allow his relationship with Mary Jane to blossom, or in this case, re-blossom. The true heart of the story is the relationships that Peter Parker forms with those around him, and the direct correlation those relationships have with Spider-Man as a result. It's interesting to see Peter and Mary Jane discuss why they broke up, only to see them try to reconcile the issues while taking on Martin Lee's men in the Grand Central Station. The root of their issues lies within the fact that Mary Jane doesn't feel like she is Peter's partner. She believes she's treated secondhand like a sidekick. We see them work out a personal issue, making it part of a larger narrative and naturally incorporating it into Spider-Man's personal story arc. Not only are they one step closer to taking out the terrorist threat, but one step closer to becoming the team they are meant to be. Mary Jane leads this operation, twisting the scenario to make her and Spider-Man an inseparable team. Insomniac created value in the relationship and portrayed it in such a complex but subtle way. There are important questions that writers need to ask when creating characters and having them interact, and the biggest question is, how do these characters influence each other's lives? This is clearly a question that was discussed in some capacity, because there's not one character in this game that hasn't significantly altered who Peter is as a person. Miles may have dropped into Peter's life unexpectedly, but it provides the transition his character needs to go from teenager learning what it means to be responsible to well-adjusted superhero who has created his own path. Peter takes it upon himself to help Miles out after the death of his father, Jefferson Davis. Seeing how Peter can relate to Miles since he lost both of his parents and an uncle, there's a sympathy between the two, giving Peter the opportunity to pass on his knowledge to someone he can mentor. While Doc Ock and Miles Morales never really met one another, they both share a very important student-mentor relationship with Peter. Otto may have slowly turned into a sympathetic villain, but the lead up to his breaking point shows us a man on the verge of a breakthrough, but in a stressful struggle with finances and mortality. He mentors Peter in a lot of ways, more than just science. Granted, Peter seems significantly smarter than him at times, seeing how we continually have to fix his work, but he provides Peter with financial stability and a career path that he can feel secure in. Their work together on the prosthetics project will potentially change lives, and it does in unforeseen ways. The Doc Ock Spider-Man dynamic may be one of the most influential hero-villain relationships we've seen in some time, not only because of how close they are at the start of the story, but the subtle influences that they have on one another. They each unintentionally crafted their foe's suit. Otto giving Peter the schematics for the advanced suit, and Peter fixing components on Doc Ock's extendable arms. To revert back to a previous point, they've both kept one another alive in the sense of surviving life in Manhattan. Their genius-level intellects allowed them to receive the grants needed to stay afloat. Name one time in a game, movie, book, or any media where the main antagonist and protagonist relied on one another for financial support. The point I'm trying to get across is that more games need to really contemplate what their characters really mean to one another, how they influence and adjust each other's lives. A lot of the time we see a character in a video game start the story and end the story as the exact same character, never having learned a lesson or having changed their point of view. Not every game has to have a deep, philosophical story. I understand that. Link just kills Ganon in Breath of the Wild, Talion slays orcs in Middle-earth, and Doomguy just murders demons. Not every game has to be dissected and have their characters picked apart, but those who do, and those who do to the caliber that Spider-Man does, will find themselves with a narrative that feels fluid, grounded, and emotional. I want to see more of Peter's life, his struggle with texting Mary Jane, and his balance between Peter and Spider-Man. An important aspect that Marvel Spider-Man has over a plethora of games, something we've been seeing more often thanks to motion capture, is the characters we deal with and experience the story through are in no way caricatures of actual humans. Here's what I mean by that. It's not uncommon in media to cast people who we'll find to some extent attractive, famous, or unique. A strong example being Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Although he did an amazing job, there was a heated debate between fans if he should play the character or not, mostly due to his lack of resemblance to Logan. In this iteration of the Marvel Universe, we run into characters that look human, and not in terms of amazing high-quality graphics, but these characters look normal. When we run into characters, they don't necessarily look like they would be any significance or involved in any grand narrative, but still manage to get across who they are just by seeing them. We can tell who MJ is immediately because she still has the same qualities that the character is supposed to have, but she just looks like a regular girl. This is incredibly important to Spider-Man's story, but a major step forward for character portrayal in general. Peter looks like a dude, almost as if he was a background character in another game. He is still discernible as the main character, but he isn't overly attractive, doesn't have the face of a famous actor, or anything of significance about him. The same thing goes for MJ, Martin Lee, Miles, and more importantly Aunt May, who actually just looks like someone's aunt. I first realized this when we met Otto Octavius for the first time. A surprise reveal, I will admit, not only because we find out he's an important aspect of the story, but because of his overall appearance. He's just a balding man, a little overweight, and he appears to be a guy you would see in the line at a grocery store. He doesn't have a wacky haircut or a cartoonishly wide face. He is your school professor, and that's it. It's reasons like this that make Spider-Man's story feel so relatable. It may be a design choice to have characters appear so common looking, but it pays off so incredibly well. Martin Lee looked like a regular businessman. Electro is the dude that won't stop bugging the cute girl at the coffee shop, and the little we see of the Scorpion makes him look like a dad that just got out of prison. They look like normal people, nothing weird, distorted, or overly designed about them. If you want your characters to feel human, then really study the many layers with all of these interesting people, and how they all provide influential moments for one another, even when around for the briefest of times. It seems to happen often with the PlayStation exclusives, but more and more games are creating dynamics that really resonate with audiences. Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, Uncharted, The Last of Us, the list goes on, but they are all examples of games with strong character dynamics. Understand what makes your protagonist a human, what their yearning is, what their goals are, and how they can be influenced by the smallest of interactions. That's how you build a foundation for what could potentially be one of the strongest game narratives we've seen to date.